Can you hear me upstairs? Excuse me.
Tell you the password.
Okay, which one is this? Whose is this? Whose is this?
I think this is the one that he was guaranteed. This is the one that Shams gave to you.
No, it has nothing to do with this. It's not here.
Okay.
No. Leave me to it. It has nothing to do with this. It's in there. Shams is. Did he put it here? I doubt it. No? I don't know. Why don't you call it? Because he's supposed to be here, or he has. Oh, I'm sorry, no. Because I don't think he used this one. We're trying to. Somebody was supposed to be here to help with that. I don't know. I don't want to bother about those things. Just these things are entered there, and as I need them, they should be displayed for you there. So we need somebody to have entered that, and who knows. Anyways, I cannot start because I don't know when I will finish this part and I get to that part and how long it will take them. And let's do something before they rectify the situation. Yeah.
The English books, I know it's just on this topic, same topic.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, these are all useful ones. Yeah. All useful ones, alhamdulillah. Well, while they're trying to take care of the situation, let me start in some way. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. First of all, I also apologize for my voice. I will do inshallah ta'ala the best I can so that you hear me clearly, and hopefully as we go along my voice will a little bit release a little bit, and it will become hopefully inshallah ta'ala a little stronger and clearer, and keep me in your dua so that all this day goes well inshallah ta'ala. Second, bismillah walhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa alihi wa sahbihi wa man walah. رب زدنا علما ولا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. Ya Allah, please increase us in knowledge and don't allow our hearts to deviate from truth and guidance after you have shown them to us. اللهم افتح مسامع قلوبنا لذكرك. Ya Allah, please open the hearing channels of our hearts to your dhikr. Ya Allah, every word we utter, every meaning we convey, we beseech you that you let it be useful to us in this dunya and in akhirah. And you keep away from our tongues and our hearts and our minds that which you know is wrong and that which you know is not useful to us with you in this dunya and in akhirah. What we're going to do today, inshallah ta'ala, is again essentially talk about and learn about, sometimes in general terms, sometimes in very specific terms, about, in a sense, what I would first say, the beautiful, rational, and logical, in addition to the spiritual dimensions, the beautiful, logical, and rational dimensions of Islamic law, and the scholarly analyses of our ulama, rahimahumullah ta'ala. And the intent is that as we are learning the processes, the essential processes by which they do that, by which they derive meanings and legal injunctions from the sources of law, as they do that, and when we observe that, we observe, first of all, really the beauty of their logical and rational approach, and also that will lead us to, in a logical, rational, natural way, to learn about, in this methodological way, to learn about why they differ sometimes. And those differences, one has an answer, one has a slightly different answer, or a completely different answer. Sometimes why that is so. And that some of that may be resolvable, that can change, but some of that is in a sense meant to be that way. And thus we learn to appreciate in a rational way first, before or for some of us after, the spiritual reasons why we should appreciate that. We learn in a rational way, appreciate those differences. And therefore, usually, those of us who do not appreciate differences amongst the scholars, first of all, and this is all about, this is not differences amongst anybody. This, I'm talking, and we're going to be talking about And what we're talking about here, we're talking about scholarly differences amongst the mujtahidun. The differences amongst non-mujtahids, if they have those differences not based on the mujtahids, are to be ignored. They're not to be taken seriously. They're not to be taken as a source of concern, because that would only lead to departing from the true path of logic and of rationality and of the shara in this case. Because it is the ulama, the mujtahidun, who represent the law, not any lay person. In the secular law in the United States, those who represent the law and the interpretation of the law are the mujtahids of the United States, who are called the Supreme Court Justices of the United States. They are the ones who tell the president or tell anybody else that your understanding of the law is wrong or right, constitutional or unconstitutional. Even if the high judges pass a law and then it is taken up to the Supreme Court Justice, then the justices will have the final word as to what the law really means, and as to whether the judge has indeed, in such a specific case, has indeed respected the standards and the rationale and the methodologies of the law, and therefore abiding by the Constitution or not. So the ulama al-mujtahidun are the ones who represent the law, and what the law means. Their differences are what's important. So when you have a madhab this, madhab that, it is usually because each madhab is associated with the mujtahid of that madhab, the ultimate mujtahid, and some mujtahids within the madhab as well. And therefore, the differences within the madhab and the differences with other madhab are very well taken seriously, because there are differences coming from the mujtahids, those who represent the law and have the authority by the Quran and the Sunnah of Allah and the Sunnah of Rasulullah, the Kitab of Allah and the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to represent the law. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Allah says, ask and inquire from the people of dhikr, that is of the Quran, of the Kitab, of ilm, the people who know. إِن كُنتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ, when you do not know. And the ulama say such ayah and other ayat indicate that Allah Azza wa Jal is commanding us to refer ourselves to the people of dhikr, who, that is the people of ilm, the mujtahidun, therefore, who will help us know when we do not know. Well, first of all, my dear brothers and sisters, to start with in general terms, first we should start and emphasize, because we're going to be talking about differences, we should start and emphasize unity first. Unity first. That by now I think every adult Muslim concerned for his or her deen knows that Allah Azza wa Jal orders us to be united as an ummah. وَإِنَّ هَذِهِ أُمَّتُكُمْ أُمَّةً وَاحِدَةً وَأَنَا رَبُّكُمْ فَاعْبُدُونَ. Allah says, and this is your ummah, one ummah, and I am your Lord. Be in ibadah of me, worship me. And he tells us, subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ تَفَرَّقُوا وَاخْتَلَفُوا مِنْ بَعْدِ مَا جَاءَهُمُ الْبَيِّنَاتِ. Do not be like those who differed and divided. Differed and divided after clear signs had come to them. Says he, subhanahu wa ta'ala, do not do that. He said to us, وَلَا تَنَازَعُوا فَتَفْشَلُوا وَتَذْهَبَ رِيحُكُمْ. Do not dispute with one another, lest you will weaken and your wind will go away. And the ayat in the Quran, as you know, are very many, and the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam are very many, which make this concept of unity and uniting together as a constant and not a variable. As a constant and not a variable. And that it is essential, and we have no choice about it. That it is essential, and we have no choice about it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to us, describing some other people who failed in reality and in essence to be one, though externally they appear as one. تحسبهم جميعا وقلوبهم شتى ذلك بأنهم قوم لا يفقهون. He says subhanahu wa ta'ala, تحسبهم, in other words, you think of them when you see them as one and together, while the hearts are dispersed, they are many. تحسبهم جميعا وقلوبهم شتى. Please listen to that, my dear brothers and sisters. You see them one together in one place, doing things together, but their hearts are many, are dispersed. They're not truly united. They're not truly loving of one another, compassionate for one another, respectful for one another inside of themselves. Anything, any minute difference or any minute conflict breaks them. You know? See them one, anything breaks them. Allah describes people like that in the Quran. In the surah most of you know. تحسبهم جميعا وقلوبهم شتى ذلك بأنهم قوم لا يفقهون. That is because they are people who do not understand. لا يفقهون. They don't understand. They don't think well. Subhanallah. And that means if and when we do that, each time we do that, whether we are PhDs or we are Nobel Prize winners or we are very educated or very successful financially or politically, but if this is what happens, and Allah says you have no brains, ذلك بأنهم قوم لا يفقهون. When we divide and break for any difference, for anything, and we break that unity, and we break that compassion and that love for one another, then Allah is saying, like He's saying, you have no brains. ذلك بأنهم قوم لا يفقهون. Said He subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is extremely essential. Very, very essential. And when we speak of the differences amongst the mujtahidun, amongst the ulama, rahmahumullah ta'ala, we must speak of that within the context of unity. Can there be diversity within unity? By now, most of you educated well, alhamdulillah, by now you understand, you have accepted that concept. But it took hard work for it to be accepted, to be made accepted to many people or to some people. Diversity within unity. And that's what we're going to be talking about. Preserving the unity and diversity while there are differences. And that those differences, how are those differences? And why there are those differences, not just any differences. How those differences, and because of their nature and the rationale behind them, they must not and they cannot, if we understand them well, be instruments to break the unity. On the contrary, to enrich that unity and to hold it strong. Second, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in everything He created, within the unity of His creation, there are differences, there is diversity. In God's creation, first of all, God is one, Azza wa Jal. And expressing His oneness and the oneness of His attributes. By the way, Allah is one. Subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah anil ashbah. May Allah be exalted from any analogy or any anthropomorphic insinuation. Allah is one, and His sifat, His attributes are one or many? Many of His attributes. And His attributes, there are many, and each one is beautiful and majestic and infinite in scope. And it is all, however, within the unity of His that, within the oneness of His that, of His essence, subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is that which we call the sifat of Allah Azza wa Jal. So He is the one, the ultimate one, yet He expresses Himself to us through His sifat, and therefore His diversity of sifat, subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Creator. Second, He created space-time and the universe. And the laws that govern this universe are so many. We study them, aren't they? In chemistry, in physics, in biology. We study in astronomy, in mathematics. And there are so many laws. And all of them pour in describing one thing, the universe. The universe. Diversity of laws within the unity of the universe. To the extent that, all scientists the greatest and brilliant, most brilliant of scientists nowadays are working on discovering what? The unified theory, the unification equation. They believe we can write all equations of science, of nature, that describe the phenomena in nature, including the electric forces which you study at school, and then at school you learned actually we could unify electricity and magnetism, right? And then we have electromagnetism. And then you have electric equations, and then static electricity, and then magnetism. Both have different equations. And then you learn through science, when you go to college, that all those equations, you can write them, electric equations for electricity and the equations for magnetism, you can write them in a set of compacted equations called what? Maxwell's equations. Unifying. And then, they have the gravitational forces, the strong forces, the nuclear forces. And now all scientists are working on rewriting all of these equations in one equation, because they believe that all this diversity in nature, they believe intellectually, and something inside drives them, as one scientist put it, that all of this is unified. So they speak of tawheed in mathematical terms and in physics terms without calling it the tawheed we talk about. But they're looking towards that. The point is that diversity of creation within unity. Allah Azza wa Jal created things diverse within the unity of His subhanahu wa ta'ala khalq. And therefore, even in nature, we see things coming together and being a unit and getting stronger and unifying even in nature. Also, we see, for example, stars forming what? Star systems. You don't find a star living alone, quote. You find a stars forming, coming together, uniting, and forming star systems. And then star systems coming together, forming even greater clusters, galaxies. And then even galaxies don't stay alone. Come together as we further study, and we find them actually forming what? Clusters of galaxies. And then even clusters of galaxies come together to form superclusters of galaxies. The unity of this universe. And within that, there is so much movement, so much diversity, so many laws. Yet within that unity of creation, Allah so created the world. The concept by this of unity is essential, but at the same time it is telling us the concept of what? Of diversity is natural within that unity. As long as that diversity is within that unity. And there cannot be really, in a sense, it seems, wallahu ta'ala alam, any natural phenomenon as a unit which does not comprise in itself diversity. And in biology and in zoology, and you see that, subhanallah, birds fly in flocks. Sometimes you have millions of birds together. And how they fly together, did you see that? They form flocks, natural. And within the flock, you see how much movement there is. And yet there is still one unit called the flock of birds. You have seen fish, right? Fish, sometimes millions, hundreds of millions of them together in a ball, together, moving together. And within themselves, inside there is movement, there is diversity, and yet they are, as a unit, they swim in schools of fish. And the bees and the ants, and this is Allah's nature. It's a natural law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the more we understand, the more we appreciate. So at the same time, this is telling us that unity is essential. But if we look deeper in that unity, we see a lot of diversity, a lot of harakah, a lot of movement, a lot of freedom. And that freedom and that diversity is preserving and preserved. Preserving, ajib, it goes both ways. Preserving and preserved, and being preserved by that unity. Preserving unity and preserved by unity. And that exists in so many aspects of Allah's creation. SubhanAllah, you know, in electricity, when a current moves from A to B in a wire, you know, there are two types of movements. There is a movement of diversity, and there is a movement of the entire thing. We call that the envelope. And inside the envelope, there is movement called, in physics terms, Brownian motion. You know, electrons are moving inside. That's Brownian motion, freely moving inside, a lot of freedom. Yet, the current is formed overall by that Brownian motion and the overall movement of everything together. Subhanallah. وهكذا. Unity, within it, diversity, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills. So what we're going to do here, inshallah ta'ala, today, is this principle, this essential principle, this divine principle in nature and in law exists. So we're going to expound today, for the rest of the time, as to essentially the diversity about that. And why there is such a diversity? Can we escape it? If we cannot escape it, this diversity within this unity, then we must respect it. But what I'm going to share with you sometimes is a little bit detailed, a little bit specific. I know some of you will understand well, inshallah. Some of you will understand not as well. But each one, I think, will understand something essential, something important about this. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. Before I go on to that part, the technical part, I will also add this. And our ulama of old, rahimahumullah ta'ala, our salaf, our predecessors, on average, and most of them, rahimahumullah ta'ala, and most of the time, they were very appreciative of this concept. Not to say that in the past history, sometimes this is not brought to attention. Not to say that in past history we didn't have the opposite. Or we did. We did have individuals or individual scholars who were very staunch and very strong and very unflinching and very obstinate. That existed too. But that's not the example. That's not the virtue. Those ulama, rahimahumullah ta'ala, and Allah forgive them, were also critiqued by the ulama of their times. And that does not represent an example to emulate, but an exception in the rule to be emulated. Al-Imam Shafi'i, rahimahullah ta'ala, just to remind you, rahimakumullah ta'ala jami'an wa hafizakum, Al-Imam Shafi'i, rahimahullah ta'ala, had used to say when they, maybe some people who didn't like sometimes the ulama being together and uniting, and even with differences, still those differences were okay, and they lived with one another and they loved one another. Sometimes what makes people differ in a negative way sometimes is not the alim who teaches them that, but the students themselves, who develop a certain attitude, and with that attitude, they compete with one another. Mine is better, yours is better, and then with time it will lead to serious confrontations. So perhaps, he said, Imam Shafi'i, said in a poem one time that you're paying visitations to Imam Ahmad, and he pays visitations to you. Why do you do that? He pays visitations to you, and you pay visitations to him. Why do you do that? In other words, he should visit you. Why do you do that? He said, rahimahullah ta'ala, something like that. قالوا يزورك أحمد وتزوره. قالوا يزورك أحمد وتزوره. قلت المكارم لا تفارق بيته. قلت المكارم لا تفارق منزله. I'm sorry. They said to me, you visit Ahmad, and that's Ahmad ibn Hanbal. You visit Ahmad and he visits you. قلت المكارم لا تفارق منزله. I responded, virtues never leave his home. That's why I go visit him. Virtues never leave his home. إن زارني فبفضله وإن زرته فلفضله فالفضل في كلتا الحالين لا يفارق منزله أو كما قال. إن زارني فبفضله. He said, if he visited me, that's on account of his courtesy. If I visited him, that's on account of his grace. In both cases, virtue does not leave his home. Subhanallah. Look at this beautiful way. Al-Imam Abu Hanifa, for example, and Al-Imam Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak. Abdullah ibn Mubarak was another giant of ilm and of zuhd. And in the time of Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah ta'ala, and he even, learned ilm from Abu Hanifa as well, rahimahullah ta'ala jami'an, and they had different views on certain issues. They differed on certain issues. And again, as I said earlier, some of us, when we see differences amongst the ulama, I'm not saying amongst people who claim, amongst the ulama al-mujtahidun, rahimahumullah ta'ala. Now they don't like that when they see differences, they like that. And they use that to build camps and to build allegiances and so on. And they don't like that there is peace. So it seemed one of those people were like that in the majlis of Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak, rahimahullah ta'ala, who had differences on some issues with Al-Imam Abu Hanifa. And then in the presence of Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak, that man was speaking with disrespect about Abu Hanifa. Scholarly disrespect was not befitting of a person to speak that way in that majlis about Abu Hanifa. And of course the person doing that thinking this is the majlis of Abdullah ibn Mubarak, anyways, who differs with him, and to some people difference means hate. Difference means I have to speak loud. Difference means I have to be impolite. Difference means I have to... Some people are like that. And that's another issue. That's an issue of the qulub. That's an issue of the nafs. That's an issue of lack of tazkiyah of the nufus, which could be for a scholar or a lay person. When the qulub are not in tazkiyah, then we react in those ways. So Abdullah ibn Mubarak addressed the person and said to him, يا ناطح الجبل العالي ليكلمه. You hearing this? يا ناطح الجبل العالي ليكلمه اشفق على الرأس لا تشفق على الجبل. He said to him, Abdullah ibn Mubarak, rahimahullah ta'ala, in a verse of poetry, he said, "Oh, you one who is attempting to break the tall mountain with his own head. Right? Have mercy on the head, not on the mountain. Look at how he answered him. Praising Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah ta'ala, in this way. It's like telling him, like, you, look who you are. Abu Hanifa is a mountain. You try to hurt him you're going to break your head. You're not going to hurt him. You're going to get hurt, not he. Rahimahullah ta'ala. Look at these attitudes. Sometimes the attitude is, one scholar put it, حفظه الله, من كان معي فهو قديس ومن ليس معي, فهو إبليس. The one who is with me is a saint, قديس. The one who is not with me is an Iblis. This is the attitude of many people, of many of us, even in ilm, let alone in matters of dunya and of agreement and disagreement. The one who is with me is Qiddish. That's a saint. The one who is not with me is Iblis, devil. And that's an attitude. That is an illness, that is a sickness in our lives, socially and emotionally, psychologically, and so on. As we will learn to see the differences amongst the ulama and why those differences existed and still exist again amongst the ulama, rahmanullah ta'ala, and we remember what we said here as an introduction, it would, inshallah ta'ala, hopefully help us develop the right attitudes. And this is for all of us, those of us who are here and those of us who are not here. Some people are different than others. Some people are naturally, by Allah's gift, gentle and kind, and they don't need a lot of learning and a lot of practice, to practice the kindness that Allah gave them already in hearts. But many of us, or perhaps most of us, we need to work on it. We need to work on it to have a character of moderation, a character of balance, a character of compassion. If we don't have it, it's okay. It doesn't mean everybody has to have it naturally. It just means we have to work on it. Because sometimes Allah gives gifts to someone who He didn't give to the other. And the other, He gave him other gifts which He didn't give the other. For example, you find somebody, this person is very generous naturally. And another one is greedy naturally. So the greedy has to work on being generous. But the generous one he's very generous, but high-tempered. Easily gets angry. And the other one maybe is, mashallah, forbearing, halim, naturally. So the second one has to work on his temper and becoming halim. While the other one is halim naturally, but he has to work on his greed. وهكذا. فضل الله يؤتيه من يشاء. But we must not be of those who, what I am is good. Khalas. What I am is good. This is the way I lived and this is the way I die. And that's it. Accept it or don't. Well, that attitude itself is a musibah. That attitude itself is a calamity. Because Allah created us to be His ibad, to change. To always keep changing. So that we meet Allah Azza wa Jal with the best possible of virtues, of akhlaq, and therefore of qalb. Remember Allah said, إِلَّا مَنْ أَتَى اللَّهَ بِقَلْبٍ سَلِيمٍ. That everyone is destined to perdition unless we come to Allah with a qalb, with a heart that is salim. And a heart that is salim is a heart that is salim from the stains of the attitudes and the states and the conditions of our qulub that are negative. So we need to keep changing and keep changing. And part of changing is, alhamdulillah, when I have a madhab, this madhab or that madhab. I follow this mujtahid or that mujtahid. I must not, as long as these, as we shall learn, these ijtihadat, these scholarly independent opinions of the mujtahidun ulama are within the scope of the shara, are within the scope of ijtihad, and they are worthy of that title, we must respect that. We must learn to respect that. We must, even if our teachers teach us, no, this is a kafir, this is a mubtadi', this is a mushrik, we say inside, with all due respect, I'm not going to take that. These are opinions of mujtahidun. And as long as they have that title, we cannot do that. That's a matter of nafs now. It's a matter of nafs that is coming to surge instead of ilm and of qalb. I cannot, with all the differences that existed between Imam Malik sometimes and Imam al-Layth ibn Sa'd on the other side, no one of the followers of al-Layth ibn Sa'd or the followers of Malik ibn Anas rahimahullah ta'ala would say to the other, that's a mubtadi' or that's a kafir or semi-kafir. Wal-'iyadhu billah. If we get to that point, then there is no scholarship left and there is no akhlaq left. Wal-'iyadhu billah. And only that can be due to one of two reasons. Lack of knowledge, and some student of ilm lack knowledge. Some people of us who may be called ulama lack knowledge, enough knowledge. And the second reason is nafs. Second reason is the nafs, the ego. The ego, the personal pride, the ostentation, the arrogance, the delusion, the competition. The nafs sometimes, that's the reason. So, as we go along, inshallah ta'ala, hopefully more of that will become clearer. And if, as I go along, inshallah ta'ala, you don't understand anything I say in the scholarly term, in the technical term, you may please ask. You may ask me as to what I mean, and you can stop me and ask me what I mean as we go along, inshallah ta'ala. But don't ask questions outside of what we are talking about, please. So let's okay, yes, good. The ulama, rahimahumullah ta'ala, when they have an issue to resolve, the ulama, the mujtahidun, rahimahumullah ta'ala, when they have a case or an issue to resolve, to have a shara'i opinion about it. What does the shara'? Usually the question is, what does the shara', not what do you think, usually. The question is, I'm not interested in what you think. If you ask me what I think, I can tell you what I think. The alim will tell you. But usually the question is, could you tell us please, because you are alim, a representative of divine law. Could you tell us on this issue what the divine law is? If he has an answer. So there is a case, there is an issue to be dealt with. So the input is al-mas'ala aw al-nas. In an issue to be resolved, or a text to look at. A text from the Quran, or a text from the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Because as all of you should know, that the primary sources of law, the primary sources of Sharia are two. Al-Quran and the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. What is the most primary of the sources of Sharia? The Quran. And it is the Quran that tells us that the Sunnah is a source. That's another discourse. It is the Quran that tells us that the Sunnah is also a source. And the ayat are too numerous to enlist from the Quran. وَمَا آتَاكُمُ الرَّسُولُ فَخُذُوهُ وَمَا نَهَاكُمْ عَنْهُ فَانْتَهُوا, and so on. And many other ayat which from the Quran tell us that the Sunnah is a primary source. So we have a text, an ayah or a hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The alim takes that. And I say case because sometimes the issue at hand does not have a text about it directly, perhaps, especially, and maybe sometimes even directly. There is no text about it in the Quran and in the Sunnah. So that's a case. That's a case also. So when there is no text, there are other things to be used. And then that is inputted, that's the input into that box. Into that box. The input is basically a dalil. The input is basically called a dalil. A dalil. In this case, it's dalil juz'i. It's a partial dalil. What does dalil mean? Proof? No, now we're going to learn something. Once I say something, don't forget it, huh? Dalil is not proof. That's what most people think. Indeed. That's what most people who read and study and Google, etc., think dalil is. Even those who went to school. Dalil is not proof. By itself, that statement leads to conflicts and disputes with people who are not ulama. Dalil is not proof. Dalil literally means guide. Literally means guide or an indicator. That's why if you're scouting, your guide in scouting is a dalil. Is a dalil. In this case, in law, the dalil is the source of law. The Quran is a dalil. The Quran as a whole is a dalil. The Sunnah is a dalil. It's a dalil. A dalil kulli. Major dalil. Because it guides me to the ultimate will of Allah Azza wa Jal and the ultimate rule of Allah Azza wa Jal on a specific issue or this or that issue. And the Sunnah is a dalil. Now the text is a partial dalil, dalil juz'i. The text is a dalil but not a proof. What do I need to do to develop a proof? I need a dalil. And I take the dalil and I develop a proof from the dalil. Like an evidence. I need an evidence and the evidence is not a proof. Is it? Don't get confused. I need to mount an argument using the evidence to make a proof. So what enters into the box is the dalil. Juz'i, partial dalil. And the box is what? Analysis and synthesis, the hermeneutics. In the box are the processes, all the processes of law and of language and so on, and the methodology that I need to use to operate on the texts. Or in this case, to operate on the case. And that box, and that machine inside, and that process inside of analysis and or synthesis will produce the result, the legal rule. In other words, the dalil is only an input. Inside of that, you can call it sometimes, some ulama would call it, wajhul istidlali بالدليل. وجه الاستدلال بالدليل. In other words, how did you use that dalil, right, that source of law, that evidence, how did you use the evidence to come to the outcome? That's وجه الاستدلال بالدليل. So sometimes when somebody says, this is something, and give me your dalil. Okay? Give them an ayah. But most are fooled. Okay, is that the answer? You give me an ayah, is that the answer? That's not the answer. Now the ayah needs to be analyzed with the proper instruments of analysis, with the proper logic, with the proper grammar, to draw and extract from that text this meaning that you're saying it means. Of course, sometimes things are very simple, but sometimes things are very complex. But overall, that's what takes place. An input, an analysis, وجه الاستدلال بالدليل, and then the legal rule, الحكم الشرعي after that. So again, I'll repeat, what do we learn from this at this point? That the dalil is not an answer. And therefore some smart people, or a alim, knowing a person, give me the dalil. They can give him a text, and they say, yes, thank you, sir. And that has nothing to do with the answer. Khalas. Just to make them a point, to make a point. You ask for a dalil, and you don't even know what you want. And a person can give you a dalil which may mean what he thinks, but it doesn't mean actually to the ulama what it must mean. But the person who doesn't know the rules of language and the grammar of the law and the theorems of the law and the axioms of the law and the rules and regulations of the law and of language will be impressed perhaps. Or not impressed because they don't have the standards by which to understand the dalil. So the first thing here we learn is the dalil is not an answer. The dalil is the beginning of the answer, not an answer. Because after the dalil, what should there be? Which is called what? Wajhul hermeneutics or Wajhul istidlali bid-dalil. هذا دليلك فما وجه استدلالك بالدليل. This is your evidence. How did you reach from that evidence that conclusion? And of course, most of us don't know the answer to this question because this is the depth analysis, which we shall learn about as we go along. We learn about meaning. We know now, we're going to know that it exists. After this, you and I are not going to come out here as experts in this field, as mujtahids. But you're going to come out depending, alhamdulillah, on the attention you have shown here today, the attention and the niyyah inside of you, of alhamdulillah, of soundness and of goodness. You will learn things that are very important to appreciate the concept of unity and diversity in ilm, and to know how actually to follow the routes to follow in a legal sense, in a juristic sense, in a linguistic sense, to follow, to ascertain perhaps that this answer might be stronger than this answer or weaker than this answer. But overall, come out appreciating the differences amongst the ulama rahimahumullah ta'ala. So first of all, dalil is not equal to proof. Dalil is no answer. It's a beginning of the answer. And this is where many of us make the first mistake. Give me your dalil. Give me your dalil. You're not saying much, my dear brother and sister, because that's not how the ulama operate. All right? The legal rule, that is the outcome, as we mentioned in the previous projection. The legal rule, al-hukm al-shar'i. Al-hukm al-shar'i, in the language of the ulama, rahmahumullah ta'ala, is of two kinds. Al-hukm al-shar'i is of two kinds. One is called al-hukm al-wad'i, and the other one is called al-hukm al-taklifi. Al-hukm al-wad'i, and the other one is al-hukm al-taklifi. Al-hukm al-wad'i. Now, some of you who know Arabic or who are Arab might confuse this if you're not well versed in these technicalities. You might confuse it with al-qanun al-wad'i. What is qanun wad'i? Who knows? Good. You don't know, alhamdulillah, then you should have no problem. You're not confused at all. Good. Because the word wad'i and qanun wad'i is the word used in current modern Arab societies, and spoken Arabic language is for secular law. Secular law is qanun wad'i. So this has nothing to do with that. This terminology was used centuries ago, before there was the secular law as we know it. Hukm wad'i means that legal sharia injunction that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, in other words, what we call the Shari' al-Hakim, the infinitely wise lawgiver subhanahu wa ta'ala, through his Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he subhanahu wa ta'ala set that wada'a dhalika. He azza wa jal made it so. That's why we call it wada'i. Ay ja'alahu al-shari'. Wada'ahu al-shari'. That is, the lawgiver sets it, put it, made it to be what it is. And I explain to you in a moment in the next slide. And I spoke about it, if you were paying attention, these few nights when we were talking about the fiqh of the beginning of the fasting of the month of Ramadan. I used that couple of times, many times, and explained to you what it meant. And you should have learned something very important there, which I conveyed to you if you remembered. But I will come back to that. So there is al-hukm al-shari, a legal shari ruling or injunction is of two kinds. One is called wad'i, one is called taklifi. Why is it called taklifi? Because there is taklif, there is responsibility upon the subject of the law. You are the subjects of the law. We are the mukallaf. And hukm taklifi, that means it's a legal injunction from the lawgiver that implies we have to respond responsibly in the way he orders subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there is a responsibility upon us. Whereas in hukm wad'i, by that very terminology, by that very title, there is no responsibility. It's not hukm. This is hukm wad'i. In other words, we have nothing to do with it. This is from the lawgiver about the lawgiver. We have nothing to do with it. What we have to do with is al-hukm al-taklifi. There is taklif upon us. There is burden upon us. Or there is responsibility upon us. So in other words, in Sharia, you find that many people, or most, don't know the first one. Most know the second one. And most who are not students of ilm, we don't know the first one. And that's called hukm wad'i. There are two ahkam in Sharia. Hukm wad'i and hukm taklifi. I'll come back to that again. And then I have on the sides, what does it say? Qat'i versus dhanni. Something very important also to keep in mind. I can still come back to it later, but I can say a few words about it now. Qat'i means definitive. Definitive. Dhanni means probabilistic. Probabilistic. Hukm shar'i from Allah or His Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, or through the processes of ijtihad of the mujtahid, the outcome, that hukm shar'i, in terms of the power of it, the authority of it, is either qat'i or dhanni. Qat'i, definitive, conclusive, 100% or nearest to 100% surety that this is the hukm of Allah. Dhanni means probabilistic. We are sure it is with a probability of greater than 1/2 and less than 1. Some of you know probability is not really that's what it means. Keep that in mind. This is our ulama. Probabilistic, dhanni, in this case, يفيد الظن الراجح. When we mean by that, يفيد الظن الراجح. Probabilistics, meaning that the arguments through that analysis, from the evidence, the arguments, the analysis, and so on, led us to say, we are sure this is what Allah intends, but at a level of surety less than 100%, greater than 50%. This is probabilistic. Anywhere between greater than half and less than 1. So, al-hukm al-shar'i is either this or that. Both are binding. Both are binding. The qat'i is binding and the probabilistic is binding. Both. Probabilistic, again, in the sense we have explained. يفيد الظن الراجح. Both are binding practically. But the difference is that one who denies a qat'i hukm, who denies it after it is shown by the mujtahidun to the person that it is qat'i, then that person may become a kafir. But one who denies the dhanni after discussion and so on is a fasiq, but not a kafir. And in the hukm of the shara, in the Quran, in the Sunnah, through the ijtihadi processes, there are qat'i ahkam and dhanni ahkam. And this is established amongst all of the ulama. This basic thing even, many do not know. And when not knowing, could be a source of discord and of dispute. If one, for example, is thinking that everything is qat'i, therefore has no room for accepting anything else, because everything he thinks is a qat'i, rule, hukm, shar'i is qat'i. I don't even know the term qat'i, but means there's no discussion about it. And that's not what the Quran, nor the Sunnah, nor the ulama, rahimahumullah ta'ala, have said and have taught. It is qat'i or dhanni in terms of the meaning that it conveys. Now the ruling, it's a ruling, it conveys that meaning. And that meaning, it's either qat'i, definitive, conclusive, or dhanni, probabilistic. Probabilistic, again with a probability greater than 0.5, 50%, and less than 1. This is called dhannun rajih. There is another dhann called marjuh. Marjuh. Marjuh is when it is affirmed with a probability less than 0.5, greater than 0. That's called dhannun marjuh. And there are arguments like that. That's what the ulama say. This argument is marjuh. This argument is rajih. And they mean by that marjuh, actually, the meaning by it is that the strength of analysis and of argument leads to a probability less than 50% for it to be true. And greater than 0. Close to 0 or 0 is called batil. Batil. Close to 1 or 1 is called haqq. Yaqeen. Less than 0.1, greater than 0.5 is called dhannun rajih. Less than 0.5, greater than 0 is called dhannun marjuh. And when we don't differ between these levels of ilm and of certitude, that itself leads to disputes. But the ulama at their levels don't have those disputes because these are their standards. Rahmahumullah ta'ala. That's why it is said, little knowledge is dangerous knowledge. May Allah help us all. Yeah, about this, yes. I will come to that, inshallah. Yes, we will come to that, bi'idhnillah ta'ala. That's a very good question, but I intend to deal with that later. That's mas'alatu thubut versus ad-dilala. Inshallah ta'ala, we'll get to that. Any other question? Yes. With what? Each hukm can be, the value of each hukm can be either qat'i or dhanni. You can have a hukm wad'i, qat'i or dhanni. You can have a hukm taklifi, qat'i or dhanni. Is that clear? Is that clear to everybody? I know. So, inshallah ta'ala, we're going to take a short recess here, because we promise to take after every hour, we take a short recess and we resume after that. And the short recess, I prefer it not to be more than 7 minutes. Inshallah, 5 minutes, mustahab, 7 minutes, jaiz, more than 7 minutes, makruh. Karahata, tanzih, not tahrim, in accordance with the Hanafi jurisprudence.